5 days from right now. There are roughly 51,000 federal employees living in New York, and depending on what agency they work for and their classification, they're all in danger of being furloughed by the federal government unless they're essential employees. There'll be an immediate economic impact on their families, and this will have significant impacts on the health and safety of New Yorkers. Women and children, those most in need of help and support, will suffer the worst effects of a government shutdown. What am I talking about? Section 8 housing vouchers and transfers won't happen. Food inspections will not happen. Funding that gives benefits, food benefits for pregnant mothers and infants and children will run out if the Republicans don't act now, literally taking foods from the mouths of babies. A government shutdown will also create significant delays in getting disaster aid from those recovering from the storms on the East Coast, particularly here in New York, as well as it threatens vital aid as far away as places as Hawaii in the aftermath of the fires that ravaged that beautiful place. It also means that new federal funds will not be available to help states like New York deal with the asylum seekers crisis. But guess what? We're better than that here in New York. We'll find a way through this. And we've been leading on the migrant situation because Republicans in Washington have failed time and time again to just roll up their sleeves, work with Democrats, work with the president, and have real, meaningful immigration reform. And if they fail on leading the government in the House of Representatives and shut down government too, we'll find a way to keep Lady Liberty still standing in the harbor with the lights still on. We'll pick it up if we have to. But right now, I'm just calling on New Yorkers. Reach out to your federal representatives, especially those who are represented by Republicans, because they have the power to go to Washington, talk to the speaker, talk to the leadership, say, don't do this to my state. They've been through enough. So get back to Washington, do the jobs that the voters sent you to do, and stop playing with the future of this country and our state. That is my message today. And now I'd like to talk about New York's role in assisting with the migrant crisis. As I've talked about before, we're facing two real challenges simultaneously. One is a humanitarian crisis. Tens of thousands of asylum seekers have left their homes that were ravaged by violence, political corruption, starvation, an economy brought to its knees. And they've come here in search of one thing. That's the ability to work. Work leads them to a better life, to be able to take care of their kids. So we have that crisis unfolding. We've been talking about this for a long time, and we're feeling the effects here in New York. But on the other hand, we have a shortage of workers crisis. Since I've been governor 2 years, unemployment has decreased 42%, from 6.9% to 3.9%. Ordinarily, those are good numbers. I mean, that's less than 4%. Only saw that a few times in my life. But what that means is businesses from as far north as the Business Council meeting I was at on Friday, to the Western New York, to New York City, to Long Island, that's all anybody's talking about in business. We don't have enough workers. And literally, people coming up to me at this statewide meeting of businesses saying, Governor, can you send me some of the migrants? I need them to work. So we can do this. We have the need and the demand, we match them together, and that's how you take a crisis and turn it into an opportunity. And that's what I'm most excited about. And we have over 400,000 open jobs right now, everything from farms to construction to restaurants to hotels, nursing homes and hospitals. My gosh, they could use workers right now. So today I'm going to be talking about some of our new resources that we're deploying to, again, turn these challenges into opportunities. And I want to acknowledge the individuals who've been really at the forefront of being the face of New York's efforts to help with this crisis, to help the city of New York get through this. Major General Ray Shields, from the New York National Guard. I want to thank you. We just saw each other in Farmingdale 2 weeks ago preparing for a hurricane. See you during blizzards and flooding events. And I was just speaking to your leadership team and talking about how normally we deal with crises wrought by Mother Nature, but right now we're dealing with a crisis wrought by man's cruelty to man. What is going on in people's home countries, driving them to flee. Thank you. Thank you and all the people you represent. Extraordinary work. I never cease to be amazed by the depth of compassion by the people sitting here, volunteers. This is a volunteer call. National Guard members at home in their normal jobs with their families, willing to come here to New York and put themselves out there to be that human face of people in crisis. So thank you. Thank all the members of the National Guard. I also want to recognize someone who's been helping us manage this military-style operation to respond, and that is our Commissioner of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, Jackie Bray, and we've been through a lot together as well. You name the storm, we've been side by side, and I'm so confident of your leadership and the path that you've put us on. So as I sat and talked to some of the National Guard leadership, we were talking about what's it like. You're out there. You're the first person they see when they arrive and they get dropped off, doing the intake at the Roosevelt Hotel, seeing people with trauma in their eyes and children crying. It's extraordinary. And now you're part of the effort to help them be able to leave those shelters, get tracked, the casework, to understand who has what options before them, and help them to be on that path to the life that they sought. And so today, under my leadership and under my direction, New York National Guard will deploy an additional 150 members to support the asylum seeker mission. That brings our total to 2,200 National Guard members supporting the overall mission. And what this will allow us to do, 250 National Guard members will focus solely on case management. And ultimately, the process, now that we have the opportunity granted by President Biden to help the Venezuelans who came before July 31st be able to apply for temporary protective status, and what follows that, literally with the same application, is the work authorization, that coveted work authorization. That's their ticket to the American dream. So you'll be helping them get a job, helping them support themselves, helping them leave these shelters, because I believe they did not come all these thousands of miles to live in a shelter with hundreds, if not thousands of others. So the National Guard has already been working to survey them. We have different categories. Some people are eligible to work right now. If they already came in through the Customs and Border Protection app, there are people who qualify for that. There are parolees eligible to work. There are the asylum seekers who need to apply for asylum and wait 180 days. And now we have this new category that allow the expedited work permits for Venezuelans who arrived here earlier. So the first thing you have to do is talk to them, survey them, track the information, find out what they're missing. Some may be here and just want a bus ticket to another state, but they don't know where to go. We can make that happen, but you have to have those conversations. You are the individuals who are that face, having those critical conversations. So I've already invested over $50 million to support case management. It's very labor intensive. We have people all over the state. It's not just the 5 boroughs. We have people up in Albany and Buffalo and Rochester and elsewhere. And we also have to support the legal services to make sure they can legally apply and not be missing any paperwork that'll delay them. We have given funds directly to health and hospitals, New York City's Asylum Help Center, and local nonprofits all over the state. And right now, we are building up an infrastructure, starting with my request to the Department of Labor to start matching eligible asylum seekers with the employers, a portal. We'll be talking more about how this is being operationalized at an event probably next week. But doubling down on these efforts, after an intensive lobbying effort with the White House and the collaboration that resulted with President Biden being engaged and helping us with that decision on the asylum seekers just a few days ago. That is a path. It is a very strong opportunity for us to start helping some of these people. So when you think about what we've done thus far, $1.7 billion already from the state to shelter and support these asylum seekers. We've gone above and beyond what is legal. We're here to help. We've played a major role in opening shelters and facilities, working again hand in hand with the mayor. And right now, if you do the math, right now we contribute probably about 40% of the cost of the shelters, the facilities, the tents. And when we open Floyd Bennett Field, and we're absorbing all the costs of that, multiple millions, it'll grow even higher, upwards of almost 45% that the state is absorbing to cover the cost of sheltering. So we said we'd be partners. We said we'd help. It's money, it's facilities, locations. We've cleaned up many, fixed them up, got them ready, and it's also the personnel. So again, our goal, take care of people when they arrive, show them the compassion of New Yorkers, but give them what they want, which is a quick exit out of the shelter system. And that is something we're going to be focusing on very intensely over the next couple of weeks. So we are going to be able to do this with the support of with the National Guard, and to make sure that we don't leave anyone behind, because everyone has that opportunity to find their way here in our state. And I also just want to conclude by saying this. This could be an undaunting challenge for some, overwhelming. And I will say I give all the credit in the world to the City of New York and Mayor Adams for what they've had to deal with, and the numbers continue to grow, and we're there to be their partners. But to those who question even why this is happening, this is New York. You need to remember this is New York. We celebrate our diversity. We celebrate who we are. We would not be this state if we were not open to immigrants from around the world. That's the beauty of New York. And if you just personalize it, every one of your parents or grandparents or great-parents, they came from somewhere else. And I speak often of the influence of my grandparents. Came here leaving extreme poverty in Ireland. Like millions before, the potato famine drove them away. My grandparents came later. Started out as migrant farm workers, working in the wheat fields of South Dakota. Not their idea of what they expected, but it's what they got, first jobs. Then they were qualified enough to become domestic servants, rising up. And ultimately, Grandpa became a steel worker. It was hot, dirty work. At the end of the day, he was exhausted. You could see the black soot on his face, carrying that lunch pail. We used to drop him off with one car for a family of 8. But he was proud. He was proud that he could support his family, all these kids who went on to become educators, school superintendents, business people, and their children. Sometimes one becomes a governor. That's the American story. That is who we are. That is what we cherish. And we will get through this together, because New Yorkers always rise up together, to the envy of everyone else. Try to knock us down by a terrorism act? Think you've beaten us down and crushed our soul and our spirits? No, we get stronger together. A pandemic, worst place in the world for the time being, did it knock us down, take us off? No, we got stronger. And New Yorkers together will get through this, because that's who we are. That's something we must never, ever forget. And with that, I want to bring up Major General Shields to talk about his work. And again, I am forever grateful to all of you and those you represent who are out there in the unknown, but being that very human face to someone who's just so desperate for help. Thank you. Major Shields.
Well, good afternoon, Governor Hochul, Commissioner Bray, Brigadier General Smith, Yapel, Colonel Margolis, and Colonel Lefton. Thank you all for being here, the members of Joint Task Force Asylum. We're pleased to host you here today in our Harlem Armory, the home of the historic 369th Harlem Hellfighters. Today, the 369th Division Support Sustainment Brigade is a descendant of the 369th Infantry who fought in World War I and World War II. Sergeant Henry Johnson fought with the 369th in World War I, and many years after was awarded the Medal of Honor by President Obama for his actions in the Argonne Forest in 1918. Today, the service members of the New York Army and Air National Guard, the Naval Militia, and the New York Guard carry on the tradition of service so many have fought for and died for since 1636 when the National Guard was founded. Be it a war to defend our nation, or a global pandemic, winter storm, coastal storm, or migrant crisis, the National Guard is there. The asylum seeker mission we are presently assisting New York State and New York City is another demonstration of our commitment to service. With more than 1,900 service members presently on state active duty and almost 427,000 duty days since September of 2022, we stand ready to assist those seeking asylum by helping link them with the resources they need to be successful and to move forward with their lives here in our country. Over the coming days, as the governor mentioned, we will be adding more service members to our state active duty roles to help facilitate the integration of asylum seekers. In addition to our state active duty missions here at home, we also continue our federal training and overseas deployment. This past year, we saw the largest mobilization in many years with more than 2,800 soldiers being deployed. The New York National Guard and our state defense forces represent more than 20,000 dedicated service members. But to carry out both our state and federal missions, we need dedicated soldiers and airmen. Our Army and Air National Guard, with the recruiting and retention teams, have been working to find these people. For a third year in a row, the New York Army National Guard is the #1 recruiting and retention state in the nation. Third year in a row, Governor. The New York Army National Guard is more than 107% assigned strength, and the New York Air National Guard is almost 102% assigned strength. The state's recruitment incentive and retention program, which pays for college education for our service members, is a key component of our success. Both the Naval Militia and the New York Guard have added hundreds of service members over the past year, primarily because of the opportunity to serve on state active duty missions as we presently are. Governor Hochul, thank you for your support of the National Guard and our state defense forces. We sincerely appreciate what your administration has done for our service members through funding for facility improvements and for continuing interest in the programs that support our service members and their families. The New York National Guard and our state defense forces are prepared and ready to respond to save lives, mitigate suffering, and protect property. Always ready, always there. And I would like to next introduce Commissioner Jackie Bray.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Governor. You know, I remember, and I want to really speak to the National Guard members in the room, and thank you, really, from all of us in Governor Hochul's administration for the work you do. You are really, obviously, on the front lines and in the day-to-day of supporting people and helping people. I remember pretty well back in October 1st calling General Shields and saying, do you think we could get a couple hundred people to go support the city? And you were game, your team was game, I was grateful for that, the governor was grateful for that. And then a couple months later I said, okay, do you think we could get another 100 people? And we were at 400 around Thanksgiving, and of course now we're up well over 2,000, and the mission continues to grow. I am particularly thrilled about how the mission is growing this week and this month. Because, you know, I say often we have to keep this simple. We have people coming in the front door of shelter, the city has people coming in the front door of shelter, and then the city has people exiting the back door of shelter. And we have to do two things. We have to try to reduce the number of people who need shelter, and we have to speed the timeline to exit from shelter. And I wish that there was a silver bullet to do that, but there isn't in sheltering and in a humanitarian crisis like this. There is no silver bullet. We've got to do every step of this process, and the National Guard is taking on, along with hundreds of staff from New York City, funded by Governor Hochul and the state, the mission of helping people exit shelter and helping people exit shelter faster. What does that mean? Well, it means that people have to be diverted from the front door. At the Roosevelt Arrival Center, the city, supported by the National Guard, is doing diversion work. It means that people, when they're in shelter, have to get case management. Governor Hochul stepped up, understanding that sometimes it takes more investments up front to save time on the back end. So you have to spend money today and devote resources today to help people leave shelter faster. That's why Governor Hochul put $20 million into health and hospitals for the city to expand case management. It's why Governor Hochul is devoting an additional 150 National Guard members today to be able to deploy an additional 250 National Guard members into the shelter system to speed case management. You have to get people the legal services they need in order for them to be self-sufficient. It's why Governor Hochul funded up front $10 million to the city for legal services that's supporting the Asylum Application Help Center, and why Governor Hochul and under Governor Hochul's leadership, the Department of State and the Office of New Americans nearly doubled their contracts this year for legal services across the state to help people get what they need to be self-sufficient. And finally, you need work, as Governor Hochul has said over and over again. And that is why we are so thrilled that through Governor Hochul's advocacy, the Biden administration has granted temporary protective status to Venezuelans who have arrived in this country before July 31st. Like I said, no silver bullet. It's going to take all of these things, and under Governor Hochul's leadership and through the National Guard, New York State is stepping up to help with each of them. So I just want to, again, thank you for your work and say how really excited I am that in addition to the day-to-day of sheltering people, you'll now, as National Guard members, be taking on the role of helping people leave shelter. Because to manage this crisis, it cannot simply be about opening more shelters or sheltering. It has to also be about how we help people not enter shelter in the first place and how we help people leave shelter and leave shelter quickly. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's program. Thank you for joining us today. Q&A with press will begin momentarily. Once again, Q&A with press will begin momentarily.
Right. The process is incredibly simple. To apply for asylum, it is complicated. You need all kinds of documentation about the circumstances in your home country. Why did you have to leave? Your past employment records, where you've lived before. You have to document all this information. It is much more onerous to apply for asylum, which is still available to everybody. But what the genius of the TPS status is, I literally went on to the app myself and clicked it on to see how hard it would be. Are you from Venezuela? Did you come before July 31st? A couple more questions. And then the next step after you put that application, and it is literally online in minutes. The next step is that you're now automatically qualified for work authorization, and that's just another form. There'll be 30 days before that arrives because they have to do processing. But this is what I asked for from the White House as well. I said, you need to surge up staff. So literally in New York City, we are, as a state, providing space for the federal government workers, of whom about 50 or 60 arriving today, to help them do that part for the 30 days to get the work authorization. But it is seamless, it is simple, and so that's why I feel confident for that group of individuals, Venezuelans who came before July 31st, it should be dramatically easier and much more successful than the long wait for asylum.
So how many of the 40% in the city's care do you think will successfully do this, given some of them are working legally off books and may not want to keep them?
Well, we're talking about removing people from shelters. Those who, and you think about the scale, estimates of 125,000 or so arrived. I think it's higher now. I'm tracking this daily. We have 60,000 in shelters. So a large number left on their own. They already found they checked in, they might have stayed a couple of days, they're all good, they found a job, they found some family, they went somewhere else. So we are simply looking at the 60,000 in shelters as our target group of people to move out of shelters. We don't want to invite people to come to New York to stay in a shelter. We have to be honest about this now. And even the shelters we have, we are out of space. And that's just the reality check that people need to know before they come to New York. But for those who are here, this is a population, I don't know, Commissioner, do you have any estimate of what number that would be? I don't know if we can quantify
It will be many thousands, but we won't know exactly how many until we get working on it.
But that's why I'm trying to deploy every resource I have at my disposal, literally the National Guard helping with the case management to know who they are, who are the Venezuelans, did you come in before this date? Start asking those questions so it doesn't take months and months to be able to take advantage of this new status, which is, if we move 10,000 out of shelters today, that's great. That is a good news story versus just simply bringing in more and more and more. So as the Commissioner mentioned, it's telling people that, there's the door that you're coming in, and know that there's not space at this point now at the volume, but also our job is to open up the back door wide and let people start getting out as soon as possible.
Governor, you're speaking about tracking migrants, and I know the criticisms from the federal government and from the state is that the city hasn't done a good enough job of tracking migrants. So just wondering, have you guys partnered with the city? Are you guys kind of in control of this, or is the city sharing information like that? Like how many migrants are going into the shelter? How many are leaving? Is that something that can be shared with journalists eventually as well?
We have been working so closely with the city from the very beginning. And my team and I are on phone calls daily, hourly, nightly to operationalize this and do it in a coordinated way. Early on, there was not a lot of tracking. But on the other hand, early on, the effort was to get people into a place to live. And we were dealing with a much smaller scale. We were able to handle 1,000, 2,000, even 10,000 in July of 2022. So that was, okay, the urgent crisis that the mayor and the city stepped up for was to help them get into a space that was safe, a hotel, a shelter. I understand that. But now at the volume, we have to go back now and survey these people. And that's why I have paid the city the money they would need to do this. The contracts go to the city. It's the city's responsibility. But I stepped up with money, offering money last February, giving more money this, I think, June. They started actually tracking people this summer. I gave another $20 million to health and hospitals. So we're invested financially in their efforts, but to supplement that, 250 National Guard on top of that. So there is a lot of coordination. Commissioner, anything else on that?
Yeah, I would say that it has been an ongoing process with the city, but the city is absolutely at this point asking the right questions, tracking people appropriately in order to help them move on, and we're working hand in glove with the city to make sure that information is shared with the state so that we can work in concert with each other.
So no database yet or anything that everyone can access with the city and state?
There is not a single database at this time that the city and the state can access, but there is robust information sharing about what they're seeing at the front door and how many people are moving on so that we can adjust our resources and make sure that we're targeting appropriately.
I know the president was in town last week. You haven't got a TPS announcement. Overall, how would you rate President Biden's handling of the migrant crisis in New York over the past year?
Well, we have been very assertive in our request for more resources, and this is something that the president has put in funding for states like New York in his supplemental, $44 billion. He wants that to happen to help states like New York. Right now, he is being jammed up with the threats of a government shutdown and even less money coming. So we would like more money, of course, but he can't just write a check for it. He has to get the money through Congress. And, their communication has been exceptional, especially in the last few months. Tom Perez, who I think he's going to be zooming into my cabinet meeting tomorrow. I mean, he is this close with the city and the state. He is making a big difference. They're opening up resources for HUD money, education money, other human service. So there's been, given that the scale keeps getting higher and it gets worse, they are really helping us in those areas. We would like more money. I would say that every day of the week we need more money, lots of money, more resources for facilities. They offered, we were able to secure Floyd Bennett Field, which we will spend hundreds of millions of New York dollars to stand up. So, but we needed that facility, and that was something that had been a hard no, because technically it was a hard no. I mean, they're not able to use Department of Interior, New York National Park lands for these purposes, but they're able to find a path we could do it. So we're going to continue asking for more venues, more money, more people on the ground, but there are people on the ground now that weren't there before. So I have to recognize there has been a major shift of prioritizing this because of the scale has gotten so large now. It was easier for the city and the state to manage in the early days. The scale now requires full-on federal government approach, and they've been doing what they can, but I'll say it for the 10th time, we need more money. Oh, I want TPS for everybody. I mean, if we had TPS for more than the Venezuelans, that would be a huge salvation for us, because we could get people the status they need, allow them to leave the shelters, go get a job, support their families, and, as I mentioned earlier, help me deal with the crisis of a shortage of workers. I have to deal with this. I mean, we have an economy that could be on fire, but you can't get tax receipts and revenues from restaurants and hotels that are only open part-time, or hospitals that aren't able to serve people because they don't have enough workers. So we are being held back by a shortage of workers. Ask a farmer how they're doing this year. It's been a really tough year because they don't have enough workers. So I want TPS for more people, but I also want there to be a decompression strategy at the border, which we think makes sense. And there are other places where people can be considering to go to take those jobs. I guarantee every city in the country would take migrants if they knew they could work when they arrived or shortly thereafter. That would be the game changer that we need for this crisis.
Hey, Governor. So, you guys are calling this a crisis, but earlier on you guys welcomed the migrants with open arms, and now it's a crisis. And clearly there's opposition, in other parts of the state when it comes to migrants, when it comes to where they're being housed. So what would you say to them in regards to those people that are opposing what you guys are doing, and trying to figure out what the solution is for this whole situation, because it's impacting everyone?
Okay. Our position has been consistent on this. It's a humanitarian crisis. Full stop. It is. These people had to leave situations in their home country that were so deplorable that they left their entire worlds, their homes, their clothing, their jobs, in search of a better life, because of a humanitarian crisis was so cataclysmic and so dire that they had to leave. That is the humanitarian crisis. I talked about the humanitarian crisis at the outset of my remarks today. It is a humanitarian crisis. What I say to the people who don't acknowledge this, I'm not sure how you respond. I mean, should we have more controls at the border? Yes. That is called the federal government's responsibility, and it calls for a bipartisan solution. It's possible. They can have meaningful immigration reform to stop the flow of people coming, have them come in an orderly succession. I, as a staffer for Senator Moynihan, worked on the last major immigration bill in 1986. Ronald Reagan was president. Tip O'Neill was the speaker. We had giants and statesmen like Bob Dole working with Moynihan, working with Ted Kennedy, working with Orrin Hatch. It was amazing. There should be a book written on a time in this country when we solved the problem, granted amnesty to 4 million people who are here, but then had more interdiction and resources at the border and employer sanctions. We crafted the grand bargain, the compromise. There's no reason why the elected people sent to Washington to solve problems today could not do the same thing that we did back in '86. So there is an answer. To those who are fearful and do not want to welcome them, I remind everybody, where did your family come from? How did you get here? Unless you're a Native American, everybody came from somewhere. And at the time, people were not told they couldn't work. Now, my grandparents saw Irish need not apply signs. That's why South Dakota let the Irish work in the wheat fields. But it's all temporary. Eventually, they're part of the New York story. And that's what we celebrate here. So I want to remind everybody, we'll get through this together. We always do. Let's not allow this to compromise our values that we hold so dear as New Yorkers. That Statue of Liberty means something to us. Now, it is a volume that is high. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of effort. But we will not change who we are because of the scale of this humanitarian crisis. We'll emerge even better and stronger. I guarantee it. Thanks, everybody.